This lecture is going to deal with marketing, specifically the root word of marketing, which is market. We can't have marketing without a market. A market is a mechanism that brings together buyers and sellers in a transactional relationship. It consists of firms creating products to meet consumer demand and consumers buying or absorbing these products to solve their problems. In a sense, marketing activities are what attracts buyers to the sellers. Buyers and sellers are not the only participants in the marketplace. There are other players and factors that can determine the successfulness of companies. All of these players and factors comprise the marketing environment. By definition, the marketing environment is a set of forces, some controllable by an organization and some that are outside their control, that influence the ability of a business to create value and attract and serve customers. Numerous factors have influence over a firm's ability to create value for customers, including the internal and external environments of an organization. An organization's internal environment includes the elements that are inside that organization and are well within the firm's locus of control. They include the various functional areas or departments, such as the marketing department, which must work with other internal stakeholders, such as the other departments in the firm and top management, to communicate organizational policies and information that is gained from the external environment. As is often the case, departments within an organization will have different views on the types of products offered, the price that they should be sold for, and many other marketing decisions. Marketing's primary function lies in its connection with the external environment. It must reach its consumers. However, as the focus moves to the outer rings from an organization, the organization loses some level of control. An organization's ability to compete lies in its external environment. While most efforts are centered in the microenvironment, or the environment that is directly outside, or with the environment that works most closely to an organization's internal structure, firms must also be aware of events that is happening in the macro environment. As we look at this diagram, as one could say of a target, the center circle is the organization, and it includes the different departments or functional areas. It includes also the rules and policies within an organization. Everything inside the organization can be controlled. As you move away from the organization, you move into the micro external environment. The micro external environment includes the firm's suppliers, its customers or buyers, its competitors, and I also like to say it includes its vendors, or the company that's selling its products. A firm has some level of control over its microenvironment. While firms cannot control the activities of all of these players in the microenvironment, they must each be considered when making strategic decisions. As you move out from the micro-external environment into the macro-external environment, i.e. think microeconomics and macroeconomics, a firm loses even more control. The macro environment consists of the collection of technological, political, social and cultural, legal, and economic factors that a firm cannot control. They include the collective and higher level activities that fall under each of these categories that affect a firm's market. While these are outside of marketing's direct control, the firm must be aware of these elements in order to take advantage of any opportunities or to mitigate any threats that result from changes. For example, a company needs to take into account the economic conditions of its customers and market before releasing new products at higher prices. While the microenvironment consists of customers, suppliers, competitors, and vendors, each of these players can have a specific influence on an organization's success in a market. To better understand the influences of each of these players, management guru and Harvard professor Michael Porter developed his 5 forces analysis model. From a strategic perspective, depending on the answers to these 5 questions, would determine whether a company should enter a specific market or not. And these specific questions that should be asked are the bargaining power of the suppliers. The greater the bargaining power of suppliers, the higher the cost to make products. Next is the bargaining power of customers. The more bargaining power customers have, the more influence that they will have over price, i.e. driving price down. The threat of substitute products also has, or can also have, the same resulting factor of driving down price. If one product can be substituted for another, it's very difficult to charge a higher price for one of those products because consumers can just choose the lower price substitute. The competitive rivalry within an industry is also something that needs to be considered. And when we talk about competitive rivalry, think about Coke and Pepsi. Competitive rivalry within an industry also leads to prices being driven down. And the more competitive a market is, the more subjective they're going to be to price wars, which is a series of consistent price drops in order to steal customers from the competitor. While prices are being driven down, costs may go up, resulting in lower profitability. And finally, the 5th question deals with the threat of new entrants into an organization. If there are low barriers to entry, meaning that firms can enter into a market at any given time, then there will be more competition that's created, thus driving prices down or creating the situation of a price war. Very important to understand your micro-external environment and in how the makeup of that market and how it operates, and more importantly, how you can operate within it to be successful. The macro environment contains forces that are pretty much outside the control of an organization, but they do have an influence on the microenvironment. The economic environment is something that we hear about all the time on the news. And the economic environment consists of factors that influence the buyer's ability to purchase products. They include inflation rates, income levels, and unemployment. These factors influence both the business-to-business market and the business-to-consumer market, two terms that we'll talk about a little bit later. The social and cultural environment consists or shapes the needs and wants of consumers. The most recent recession of 2008 to 2009 and its related economic influence has altered some consumer attitudes towards buying locally grown foods and have encouraged many people to buy or to plant their own gardens. Additionally, the cultural shift coming out of that recession is to train people to be value shoppers. Because firms overproduced in the lead up to the recession, they were left with a surplus of products. In order to move those surplus of products, they offered many incentives to buyers which added value to them or lowered the price. Even as the economy has been strengthening, consumers have then conditioned themselves to become value shoppers, so that they are going to always look for a deal or a discount, which will thus affect the profitability of the seller. The competitive environment includes factors relating to the number of and potential action of competitors. The legal environment includes all of the rules that govern business practices and include actions to protect consumers and businesses from unfair trade practices. This element becomes even more complicated as companies seek to expand globally. Many countries are not as business friendly as the United States is. Many of you may have purchased international editions of textbooks, and you notice that when you purchase that textbook is that they usually cost less than the US version. One of the reasons that this product costs less internationally is because of price controls that are imposed by foreign governments on private businesses. Those price controls aim to keep products more affordable to consumers, but they also limit a firm's profitability. A company needs to be aware of such price control laws in a specific market while putting together or conducting their business analysis on whether to enter that specific market or not. Working hand in hand with the legal environment is the political environment. The political environment has influence in a company's domestic market and its global markets. While the U.S. has a more stable political structures, other countries cannot say the same. Government actions can alter the playing field for some businesses and industries. With consistent change in political leadership can also lead to an increase or decrease of the legal barriers in performing and operating your business in certain areas. While we don't normally tend to see this in the United States, a time of crisis that was created during the last recession led to numerous political actions to create new laws that regulate businesses, specifically in the banking industry. The creation of the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Bill has made it or added a level of legal compliance that banks need to be aware of, making it much more difficult for them to operate their business, which has directly led to many companies not being able to acquire the financing they need to expand their businesses and lowering unemployment. The political and legal structure of an organization can have a direct impact on its economic environment by creating rules and regulations that are anti-business. A political environment can create a situation in which there is no growth. If there is no growth, then many people aren't making more money and are susceptible to inflation, and many people are unemployed, which would hurt the size of a marketplace. And finally, the technological environment can have a great impact on marketing activities because they can alter marketing due to any scientific advancements that lead to new innovations. These innovations can make entire product categories obsolete. For example, typewriters were made obsolete by word processors, which were made obsolete by the increase in popularity of desktop computing. No matter what industry a firm operates in, it needs to be aware of its micro and macro environment. Because a firm needs to sell in order to stay in business, they can distribute their products or sell their products in two distinct marketplaces: the consumer market and the business market. Both of these markets can be influenced by the macro and the micro external environment. The consumer markets are the markets that consist of the end user of the product or service. For example, the person that is buying the product for their own personal use. The consumer markets include individuals and households that are potential or actual buyers of a product or a service. Consumer markets are very large. Consumers purchase products to satisfy their individual wants and needs, and it accounts for approximately 70% of the U.S. economy. In 2012, consumers spent about 11 trillion, or just north of $11 trillion. This amount is larger than the entire Chinese economy and the economies of Britain, France, Italy, Germany, and Russia combined. The consumer markets drive the U.S. domestic economy. As such, consumers base much of their purchase decisions on the expected utility or value they perceive the product will deliver. When the utility is very high, a surplus can occur, which means that the company undercharged for that product. Consumer markets are heavily influenced by advertising and promotion, and brand names are used to convey some sense of value. Some common brand names, such as Whirlpool appliances, Edge shaving gel, Starbucks coffee, Red Bull cola, Skippy peanut butter, Mountain Dew soda, Tide laundry detergent, Mercedes-Benz automobiles. These brand names have been built up over time, primarily through the satisfaction the product has given its consumers. Brand names are used to convey value and, more importantly, can allow companies to charge higher prices for their products. Business markets include individuals and organizations that are potential or actual buyers of goods and services that are going to be used in or in support of the production of other products or services that are supplied to others. These business markets, often referred to as the business-to-business or B2B marketplace, purchase products to fulfill their needs, but the needs will differ from those of the consumers. Businesses purchase products to create other products or to provide services to consumers. For example, a manufacturer such as General Motors will buy the raw materials and components parts needed in order to create and manufacture their automobiles, which will then be sold in the consumer markets. When General Motors is purchasing brake pads, steering wheels, and radio components, they are doing so in the business markets. But the business markets also includes the work gloves that GM is purchasing for its employees, also includes the copy paper that they're purchasing for its office staff, the pens, the computers, and anything else that is used by GM to conduct its daily business. Business markets also include intermediaries such as wholesalers and retailers. When Best Buy is purchasing a shipment of iPads from Apple, they are doing so in the business market to in turn resell it in the consumer markets. Other players within the business marketplace are colleges, universities, and school systems, and governments and government agencies. Whereas in the consumer market, customers are making the decision to buy products to satisfy their needs and wants, the business markets are a little more formal. Within B2B, there are three basic classifications of purchases. They are new task, modified rebuy, and straight rebuy. In a new task purchase, a product is being bought for the first time, or there is a unique purchase of a product or service. New task purchases require extensive effort to determine what to purchase as well as who to purchase from. In a modified rebuy, companies have experience with the product but is considering alternatives, either a different brand of product or buying from a different vendor. And in a straight rebuy, a company reorders the current product from its current vendor. The straight rebuy is the least strenuous process. And if you look at this chart, when we move downward from top to bottom, we are moving from the hardest purchase, or the most involved, to the least involved. Firms normally have a specific set of procedures for purchasing these products, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. Sometimes they are centralized in a procurement department. In others, one employee is designated the power to order. In government agencies and colleges and universities, there is often an official proposal process that solicits bids from qualified vendors. Understanding the different purchasing classifications within business and the different purchasing procedures will allow a company to become more successful in the B2B market than if they ignore them or have no knowledge of them altogether. In a graphical representation, the relationship between consumer and business markets can be defined visually. In this example, we are looking at a baker who purchases raw materials such as flour, eggs, milk, etc. to make bread. These are considered the raw materials, just like the component parts for an automobile. Those raw materials are used to create a final product. That final product is then sold in bulk to grocers. So let's just say that this is ShopRite. The purchase of the raw materials is made in the business market. In which market do you think that the bread is sold to the retailer? If you guessed the business market, you'd be correct. Because the supermarket acts as an intermediary, the purchases they are making are in the business-to-business market. However, when that retailer breaks up its purchase that they've made in the business market and sells individual loaves of bread to you and I as a consumer, they are doing so in the consumer market. There are varying differences between the business and consumer markets. And those differences are that consumer markets have many more transactions. For example, ShopRite may have bought 100 loaves of bread. Even though they bought 100 loaves of bread, they did so in one transaction. In selling that bread, they may do so in 100 separate transactions. So the consumer markets have more transactions. They're less formal than the business market. Business markets tend to have less transactions. We're going to abbreviate transaction to TS, but those transactions have higher dollar values. Remember these three key differences. For reference, here is a table that outlines the differences between the B2B and the B2C or consumer markets. I hope you found this lecture informative and helped to explain what a market is and the differences between the different types of markets a business operates in, as well as the internal and external factors that a company needs to be aware of in order to create an effective operational strategy. The next lecture will deal with the process and how firms set goals and create strategies to carry out those goals. And within those goals, or in order to carry out those goals, a company must be aware of its marketing environment.